Since the beginning of time, music has been a defining factor of generations and cultures. Looking back at the 20th century, we see that the Woodstock Music and Arts Festival was a major defining moment for the century, as well as for rock and roll. Nothing like it had ever been done before, and concerts after it would take on a whole new meaning. The brilliant idea of creating a festival based on peace, love, and music was dreamed up one night in a game of pool by two hippies, Artie Kornfeld and Michael Lang. Joel Rosenman and John Roberts later joined the two in production, bringing in over $2 million for the project. The time of the festival was in the midst of the civil rights and anti-war movements of the United States, causing this festival to be morphed into a counterculture movement to emphasize peace and love. The producers included the words Music and Arts Fair with the intention of making the event more than just a concert, but a showing of a generation. The weekend was full of arts and crafts, yoga, and spiritual directions, a whole Woodstock nation. Ironically, the Woodstock Festival did not actually take place in Woodstock, New York. The original location for Woodstock was Wallkill, New York, but because of conservative politics, the Wallkill City Council at the town meeting did not approve the event, and just a month before the festival, a new location needed to be found. Luckily, due to connections with the producers of the event, they were able to acquire a 600-acre dairy farm owned by Max Yasgur in Bethel, New York. The land was a perfect location for a concert. They were able to place a stage at the bottom of a large hill so that everyone would be able to get at least a glimpse of the acts. Also, at the bottom of the hill was a large pond which became a popular site for bathing among concertgoers. Woodstock was never intended to be a free event. 186,000 tickets were sold beforehand, and a crowd of 150 to 200,000 was what was expected. But as word of the event got out, more and more people began to show up. Eventually, the fence surrounding the event was ceremoniously cut down, symbolizing the concert's prominent idea of peace and love. The total attendees of Woodstock reached almost 500,000, and one of the most remarkable aspects of Woodstock was the great variety in attendees. Many believed the event to be a hippie concert, so those who showed up were long-haired, bearded, and high. But in reality, the levels of diversity reached at Woodstock is unfathomable. There were blacks, whites, gays, straights, rich, poor, Christians, Buddhists, atheists, philosophers, you name it. Everyone was welcome, and everyone came. People from all over the country flocked to upstate New York the weekend of August 14th through 18th, 1969. Cars lined up for miles trying to get into town, and in fact, traffic was so bad that many of the acts scheduled to play in the festival got caught up in the traffic and were unable to play. The event took place on an exceptionally hot weekend, and rain caused the site to turn into a massive mudslide. Drug use was rampant, sanitary conditions were horrendous, a food shortage occurred, and a few accidental deaths took place. But Woodstock was also the home to two births as well as a lack of violence, which is today thought to be caused by the abundance of drugs. Yet to concertgoers, none of this mattered. They were there for the music, and that's exactly what they got. Day one of the festival was intended to showcase folk music, and the second 2 days were dedicated to rock and roll. Though he was scheduled to play fifth, Richie Havens kicked off the festival Friday night with a performance to make him famous. He was so well received by the crowd that he continued to play until he ran out of songs. Country Joe performed solo without his band, The Fish. His performance became a great anti-war statement, and his songs were well known by those of the Vietnam War time, one even asking, "What are we fighting for?" The Who was almost not able to play because they refused to go on without being paid ahead. But eventually an agreement was made, and The Who took the stage in the early hours of Sunday morning. Their performance was one that made them very well known in the U.S., and is most memorable because the sun was rising as they played their set. Joe Cocker had been around the music business for quite some time, but it wasn't until his performance at Woodstock that he became most known. He was most famous for his rendition of the Beatles song, With a Little Help from My Friends, noted today as one of the best covers. His performance was right before the torrential rainstorm that caused the festival to be delayed for many hours.
This is the second time we've ever played in front of people, man.
Woodstock was the second time Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young performed together. They played their famous cover of Joni Mitchell's Woodstock, which has become the definitive recording of the event and immortalized Woodstock's spirit of song and music. Their famous acts included Janis Joplin, who died a little over a year later from drug overabuse, a pregnant Joan Baez, a young Carlos Santana, Creedence Clearwater Revival, Sly and the Family Stone, Jefferson Airplane, and many other unforgettable performers. But the most well-known performance was that of the headliner, Jimi Hendrix. He was scheduled to be the last performance and began his set around 9 a.m. Monday morning, though most of the spectators had left by this time. His amazing rendition of the Star-Spangled Banner has been forever linked to Woodstock, as well as the generation. Woodstock was not just about defying music and rock and roll, but it was about the shared experience of a generation. People from all walks of life were able to gather for 3 days of peace and love to watch unforgettable performances from some of the biggest acts of the decade. It changed concerts forever and showed that peace could be obtained even in the most churning of times. When it all came together, Woodstock truly was a remarkable masterpiece and a perfect ending to a turbulent decade.